story. Now hear those who were involved in making it come to life. Join us as we go behind the door.
Good evening, roomies, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Door with the Grey Rooms podcast. I am your host, Brooks Bigley, and with me tonight is Seth Augenstein, the author of Season 4, Episode 17, entitled Bequest. How are you this evening, Seth?
Hello, Brooks. How are you?
I feel like I'm a little nervous here because I'm interviewing you, and this story is about an interview, and that didn't end very well, so I don't know how meta we're going to get here. Also, you told me prior that you are an ex-reporter, so this is just boding very badly for me.
Yeah, it's meta upon meta, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird for a reporter, actually, to be on the other end of the microphone, but it's good. Different exercise.
I'll bet. Hey, where are you located at?
New Jersey.
New Jersey? You don't have a New Jersey accent.
That's almost everybody at college said that I did not, but, you know, when you get in various states of disrepair, say a couple drinks in, all of a sudden it comes out, you sound like Tony Soprano. So
you're actively fighting it, I guess.
That's right. Suppression is key. So.
And how goes the weather out there in New Jersey right now?
It's really muggy. It's really overcast and muggy, but, you know, everything in my yard, I'm looking out the window here. It's absolutely overgrown and teeming. So spring is here.
Yeah, interesting. Like my last author interview, they're from New York, and they said the same thing. It was very cold and muggy out, and yet we're in the middle of May now. Like, where the hell is summer at?
Yeah, well, every year it seems like it gets a little stranger and stranger with, you know, you'll have a run of a couple 90-degree days, and then all of a sudden there's a frost. You know, they say climate change, so I don't know.
Everything is always changing. It's just the direction the world's headed in. So, hey, your story, whoo-wee, this was a different caliber of storytelling, I feel like, with us here on this podcast. I mean, who thought that two people sitting down for an interview could be considered horror? You know, but the tenseness and, like, finding out ultimately what was happening, you know, with Our Lady, Miss Brigador, you know, being interviewed. Whew, very, very, very intense, and all of the religious undertones. I almost feel like listening through, you didn't even have to really pick up on that, and that could have just been kind of a sidebar, but I for sure tried to do some research before talking with you just about key things, and I realized that, like, there's a shit ton of religion kind of running below the surface of this story. So let's back up and start. Like, where did you get this concept for this story? Where did you start at?
That's a great question. I will say too, like, just the fact that it is kind of a departure from, you know, say some of the splatter stories, great stuff, but the framework around it just kind of came very organically because, you know, if I wanted to tell a story about this horrible, you know, pre-biblical, indescribable God, how would I frame some kind of suspenseful horror story around it? And having been an ex-reporter, you know, I was like, oh, well, a reporter might discover something about that. And what's the most dramatic telling of this? If it's, you know, child murder, really, in essence. And that, you know, my time doing forensic science and a lot of crime stories, you know, things like all those really sordid stories from at least my age group. I'm 40. When I was growing up, like Andrea Yates, that's the name, Susan Smith, these people who killed children, that came to mind. And I was like, what if we had a jailhouse interview? And, you know, putting a reporter in a situation. And I've actually done jailhouse interviews as a reporter. So I knew a little bit of that dynamic. Granted, not, you know, death row kind of dramatics, but in an even more long-winded way of saying that's how this all came about. Taking, you know, that kind of nugget of inspiration and kind of framing it with stuff that I knew about or had some experience with.
Well, yeah, it was the perfect setting, you know, to set the narrative in because, you know, in order to give that exposition of all of these religious backings as to what Molech was and why child sacrifice was involved. And, you didn't need to describe too much. It basically came about just by that creation of, Mary Agnes Brigador being who she was, and then like her explaining her past. I mean, that was a phenomenal job of again, burying the origins of this religious, I guess Molech was a deity, but also kind of sometimes translated as more of just the actual ritual itself of sacrifice. It's still kind of up in the air. But still, like, you did a fantastic job of writing this story that someone who didn't at all even understand religion, didn't care about religion, wouldn't maybe see this per se as a religious story. It's still just a story about this woman who's a killer, and she could be lying her ass off the whole time and just scaring the reporter, and so you delivered a fantastic tale, that ratcheted up the thrill and delivered something fucking awesome for us to produce into an audio drama.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, just to further your point, like Mary Agnes's last name, that Bragadoir, that's an Irish word for liar. So it's like there's some stuff like woven in there where it's like, hey, is this even true? And that's the religious underpinnings too. Like, even if somebody isn't religious, like, and which I'm frankly like not even that religious, I would not describe myself at this point in my life. There's something unsettling though, and that's what I feel like I've gone to in like a couple stories, and like even the first book I wrote. There's something unsettling about like a conspiracy or like an alternative history that kind of undercuts what you've kind of like based reality on, or you base your like historical knowledge on. And like, when I go back and read the Old Testament as a, 38, 39, 40-year-old, as opposed to when I was like 8 and a snot-nosed little kid in the pew, all of a sudden you realize like, Adam and Eve, the whole Cain and Abel thing, that whole scandal, ended up like kicking them out, or kicking rather Cain out. And, the wording in the Bible is like, oh, like he went and lived among the others. I'm loosely paraphrasing, but what does that even mean? Who are the others? Like, and then you start looking at the lineages, and it's like, well, if Adam and Eve are the only two humans, like, how did they get this teeming chosen one population? You know what I mean? It's just, there's a lot of inexplicable things, and if you pick at that, I mean, you get some pretty gnarly stories out of it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, no pun intended. It opens the door, to alternative thinking and understanding, absolutely, about just, the history behind how humans started. And if we, without pissing off anyone who is religious, I'm not going to say the Bible is right or wrong. It's just another form of religion that many different human beings believe in. But if we can somehow just say that maybe, the Bible as we know it is a way in which humans wrote to try and figure out their history, right? To catalog their history. Then let's go back. How did Adam and Eve, how could just two people start all humans? That would be some weird, inbreeding and whatnot happening. So clearly there were others, and so like it says, Cain was then doomed to roam with the others. So holy shit, that opens up, everything. So then there were clearly other sects of people also at the same time, outside of the Garden of Eden. And, whatever happened to Adam and Eve in their old age when they died, they lost their son Abel, but Cain met up with all the others. And then clearly, longer down the line, we have Abraham and all of his people. So there definitely is other stuff going on, and the Bible itself just kind of pinpoints just certain portions, of history, I suppose you could say. So, I mean, fantastic job of, like you said, picking at, well, what is the alternative here? What else is there that I can kind of mine for my story? And then, layering it upon this framework of, this interview with this woman who, and again, like I said, this could be a case where she's just lost her mind and she just really did kill everybody. And she's just saying this, she mentioned several times she was not afraid of, our our narrator when like he got the shiv back from her. And she's like, what are you going to do? Kill me? Take away the last hour of my life? She had nothing to lose. So it was not like she was trying to lie to hide anything, but maybe in terms of leaving a legacy behind, she could just say whatever she wanted. I love the ambiguity that can happen from horror when it's told the right way, that it can be this or it could be that. You don't actually pigeonhole it right in. You didn't have some like epilogue that explained that all of the kids really were found and that they were alive and well. This is all just what she said. So we have to go with that. So fan-fucking-tastic job, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I can't say enough the performances. I mean, just incredible. Like I guess Aaron Lillis did Mary Agnes. I mean, just like my skin crawled, and I was like, "Oh, she sounds like great looking. She sounds attractive." Like at the same time, it was like it was incredible. I mean, just that kind of tension, and like. The little comedic moments too that I frankly forgot that I included because I wrote it like 18 months ago or what have you. But when she's like, she whispers, "He lives in Cleveland." It's like it was just it was like, oh wow, she's really got the whole palette there.
Yeah, Erin is such a versatile actor. She embodies, every character that we've ever given her. She's done lots of stuff with us. I knew her from the No Sleep podcast. That's where I was first introduced to her. And she does the same thing over there. She embodies, you can't pigeonhole her into one thing. She's good at all of the things. She can be evil. She can be good. She can be otherworldly. She could be human. She could be young. She could be old. And it's not just like a jack of all trades or a Jill of all trades. She's just really good at what she does. She reads those words and then becomes that character that the author wrote. I've never heard anyone say, well, yeah, but she could have done it this way instead, and just singing the song that you had put, in the story that as our narrator is introduced to her, just humming that song out loud. Like she just embodies it completely. Absolutely.
It's amazing. Yeah. What a talent really is. Awe-inspiring.
Yeah, and then EK Dagenfield, he's our typical
so
like
solid.
everyman. Yeah, he's really good at
Very
experiencing the horror. We've used him before where he's like he's a strong guy. He presents himself that way, but still he's the one that always has the calamity happen to him. He was in a story with a historical folklore, the Sukuyant, kind of like a succubus, and he played that character perfectly. He was like a scientist, in one of our other seasons that, befell some horrible shit that happened to him. And he always is, you're never like, God, what is this punk bitch doing going through this? I hope he dies. You very much root for him. He's really good at keeping you in, and still everybody knows that our characters die in the end. Yeah. So one thing that was cool I thought about your story too was just the minor ways in which so you had am I saying, is it, I'm going to butcher Brigador. I just say Brigador, but how do you say it correctly?
Oh, man. I lived in Ireland even for a study abroad program, and like Irish, I don't know if you have any familiarity with the Irish language. It's like totally like foreign to me, like literally, but like alien. Brigador, I think, Brigador. Is my best guess at it. But, you could even, like, of course, even like before the production was made, I was like, how are they going to do the Irish names? And you Google that, and it'll come up with like 4 different like dialects. And it's like, well, take your pick. It's, I guess, like anything goes.
All right. We'll call her Mary Agnes.
Yeah, that's easier.
Henceforth, she's Mary Agnes. So the way that like Mary Agnes kind of like, and again, this just kind of adds to her evilness and to the point of like, maybe she could be lying here, but like how she mentioned that she had paid off the officers. This was her last hour to kind of talk with, our reporter, our narrator. I keep calling him narrator, but Michael. Is it Screven? Michael Screven.
Screven, yeah, Screven. Screven. That's like I guess it's a British-Irish name, but it means writer.
Oh, God. All right. So Michael and Mary Agnes, that's what we're sticking to.
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So the ways in which Mary Agnes kind of tells him, like, oh, yeah, you could scream if you want. It doesn't matter. They're not here now for this last hour. And then she magically has his cell phone. She's got this shiv that she pulls out. Like, it really kind of adds to the mystery, I think, behind, what she's saying. Is she really being truthful about what she's claiming? And just, she's like trying to scare him, but she's also not directly trying to hurt him. Of course, in the end, we know that basically it's implied that she ultimately ends his life. Maybe he was the final sacrifice or something. But I like how it's very subtle, the different ways her chains, her, what do you call them? The handcuffs
shackles.
Somehow were her shackles. Thank you. Her shackles are magically unlocked. I don't mean magically like there was some magic afoot, but definitely that like all of this was a setup, that she had planned, and this was a long con for her. So I almost feel like that leads to what she's saying being truthful, that like this was a very long, played out drama that she had planned because of the idea that she was saving these kids, for some ultimate sacrifice. But really she was, bequest. What is bequest? You're bequeathing something upon them. They were her inheritors. And so she was giving them the power to move on. And clearly I'm just inferring this is that, Michael's, our narrator's wife was maybe the last child, Ellen, something or other. You can either confirm or deny or say nothing, but
sure. Up for interpretation, but I mean, totally intended. Even
okay.
And Graham Rowat, by the way, being the jail guard, like he kind of like even fed into that long con, like the way that he intoned it, like he kind of. It was kind of like snide about her being the only woman to be executed in Kentucky in the last 150 years. She's special, spelling it out. But like, it was still, he was holding something back. It in my mind, at least, from the writer's vantage point.
Well, he was clearly paid off by her. I mean, he would have been one of the officers to leave the scene in order for her to have her way with, our reporter.
And giving the smoke. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. She pulls out a pack of smokes and a lighter. Like, where did all that shit come from? So yeah, it's not a case of just like, oh, well, this author had no idea and was just pulling shit out of his bag, trying to get the plot moving. Like, it definitely adds to the mystique behind, just what the hell is going on. It shows her power of control, that she also exhibited just by explaining, her past. I caught the inference of how, like, her first husband that, quote, lured her past, the Dixon line, was a teacher of, like, the old Levant history. And that isn't that tied back into, like, the Canaanites somehow? Yeah. In the Old Testament? The Levant area, or?
Yep. Entirely. It's all supposed to be, interconnected and of a piece. And no, I mean, just to go back even about the wife, like, totally confirmed. Like, the wife is the last, quote, victim. If she's to be believed, but certainly the wife is up to no good, one could believe.
Well, and Mary, what's her name? Mary Agnes knows about his wife and the fire pit. We start the story off. Very clever to do it that way. We start the story off with Michael talking to his wife on the phone about the strangeness of the fire pit, the strangeness of the time of the year. But whatever. Hey, I gotta go deal with this death row inmate that I'm about to interview. And then she knows about it. Mary Agnes knows about his wife. Here's your phone. Call her. Confirm. So again, that just kind of shows her clever power, that she ultimately held over the entire situation.
I will also say the audio production right on that, like, whatever you call it, like a cold open, I mean, it's not always the best to start off a short story just, in medias res or like right in the middle of a line of dialogue. But I did decide, because I thought it fit the format of the story. It's all about talking this entire story. It's all about the dialogue, and the back and forth. And that initial dialogue is just one-sided, right? You never hear the wife. But I say all that by the way that the audio production, everybody just did such a stellar job, because it isn't jarring like it could be in print. It just kind of like, it just played like you're walking past somebody and you're hearing one side of a cell phone conversation as you're passing this guy, and he's just trying to get off the phone. It was really, really extremely subtle, but arresting. So
yeah, it dumps you right into the action. I love that versus like it opening with like a crescendo and then like the narrator comes in. It was Monday morning and I was at the prison and I was about to interview blah, blah, blah. That's really stale and boring and done a bazillion times. So you writing it that way, was brilliant to start us off that way. So it sounded great, of course, in audio format to go from that and then into him then narrating over that. I thought that was, absolutely golden. Yeah.
yeah, it came together because, I don't think just any audio person could do that, like to just pull off those dynamics. So it was fantastic. So
Jason knows what he's doing. He
does.
Absolutely phenomenal. I say this often enough, and it's like, how many more times can I keep confirming it without sounding like the old Behind the Doors where we would just pat ourselves on the back? But yeah, Jason's dialed in. Jason always has said from day one, I want you to be the fly on the wall in the room, watching the characters and what's happening, and he really much produces things that way. He doesn't see it as just like a flat panel TV where you're just watching the action. He likes you to like really be there in the action. I mean, for God's sakes, it's audio drama. You have it playing in your ears, like you have to close your eyes and you get lost thinking that you're in it. It's really beautiful. Audio dramas just in general are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. When done to this level, I mean, it's a whole cinema experience, really. Incredible, really.
So have you done stories for other podcasts or that have been turned into audio drama before?
Yeah, here and there. There was, Manawaker Flash Fiction podcast. They did one that was kind of, what was that, 2 years ago now? It was about an Islamic mythology demon called a jinn. Very, very short story. It was pretty well done. And I think it was for Halloween this past year. The Night's End. It's a podcast out of Australia. They did a story of mine that I wrote in this same flurry of like, I think I wrote 20 short stories in a year after writing that one book that I mentioned. It's just banging them out, just as fast as they would hit my brain practically. And they did a great job too. That was kind of a weirder story, kind of a ripoff of M.R. James, dare I say. But yeah, so I've had some experience, and this was it's always gratifying to hear your words come to life, especially somebody that's trained with the human voice and knows what they're doing. It's always gratifying, but this, the full cinematic experience was terrific. And I neglect to mention too, like my first book, it was made into an audiobook by a terrific voice actor, Mike Eberhardt, out of California, by your way. So that was like huge because, that involved like a couple dozen voices. I think the guy is a man of many hats. So, it was kind of awe-inspiring because, my book is not, the first book is not short. It's like 13 hours. And it involves, Japanese accents, Irish accents, a whole grab bag of dare I say crazy, because it spans the world and different time frames. So it's a long way of saying, I have experience with people like translating my words to sounds, and it's always gratifying, but this was exceptional.
And did you write this story specifically for us, or when you heard about the submissions, you thought, well, I've just wrote this story and I'd love to offer it to you?
Yeah, no, full disclosure. No, I mean, I was writing for myself, by and large, those flurry of short stories over that year. I think that started like right before the pandemic and then just like continued through the pandemic, wasn't that much going on socially. So I was pretty much sitting home and stewing in my own creative juices or whatever you'd say. But, so no, I came up with the story and just saw the submission call, and I think at that point I was a little familiar with the podcast, but no, I became way more familiar after really digesting it. And then Actually, I think I'm going to be working with you guys. I think I can say this. I'm going to be working with you guys on season 5, a couple stories.
Did you get an email? Is that what you're saying?
I did. So
welcome aboard, my friend.
yeah, it was super exciting. That was like the high point of a very shitty week this week, candidly. But yeah, those were written. I started off writing them just, again, artistic process, the muse, chasing the muse. But I think about halfway through, I was like, oh, this could be a Grey Rooms story in each case. And so then I did kind of start bending it that way and even, retailored it to, the script format, which is really an interesting way to take like a prose story and then start thinking about how somebody who knows audio effects and the pacing of an audio drama, how they would want it kind of teed up for themselves. It actually opens up the story in a large respect, because you start thinking in terms of that pacing and that ambiance. It was just like a really, really cool exercise in that respect. So
yeah, there's a line between authors who just write in prose or whatever their style is. It is not necessarily set up for a script format or even for an audio drama format. And then there's people who know how to write that way. And sometimes, we will get stories in. We've been revealing this a lot lately, that we'll get stories in, or just the story is just a banger. It's just such good quality. But there's no first person perspective. It's all third person or something different than what would work. We can't just have a guy just narrating the entire thing. We need some kind of action going on. So we will either speak with the author about having them change it, or we'll do subtle changes ourselves and then have the author approve it. And then we have our authors who just know exactly how to do it. But the last thing I'd ever want is for an author to feel like, I've got this concept, I'm not familiar with how to write a script, but I'm going to try and fashion it that way, because then it might lose its magic as they're writing it when they're trying to format it a certain way that they're not familiar with. So I still encourage people to just get your story done. Make sure it's a good story, of course, because everyone has ideas, but you got to write a good story also. You can't just give us your idea. We can't work with that. We got to work with an actual usable story. Anyways, I would still encourage authors to write how they're comfortable, and then we will work with them. But it sounds like you kind of have an idea of, much more to go. I mean, it was actually just this past weekend that our team got together to meet in real life. We've never done that before. And so me and Jason and Arthur Unk, who just joined, our podcast as full-time writer, Cassie, Tori, we all sat in a room and we were going through submissions, and we definitely enjoyed your story. So that's
that's great.
You're totally safe in saying that you're part of our season 5. We sent you that email. So anyways, awesome. Yeah. So we know what needs to be worked. We went through all that this prior weekend. We know what needs to be worked on a little bit more. We know what is already perfectly golden, and we could technically start producing tomorrow if we wanted to, those kind of things. But I would want all authors to know, just write how you write how your heart feels, get that out, give it to us, and we'll work with it.
How much better was the process in person? Like to be in the actual room and to be mulling these things over? I imagine it was kind of more organic, right?
Yeah, it was super inspiring, absolutely. Because in the prior years, when we would gather every season or prior season, and we would do it all kind of through Zoom, through Discord with video, and to be able to be in the same room together, we've all known each other for years now, and so meeting in person was like, oh, this is cool, oh, this is normal. So that we got that out of the way real quick. But yeah, the process, it felt like we were at home. It just felt natural, sitting together and discussing everything. There was no ego. There was no weirdness about it. But it definitely felt more efficient than trying to do it, let's say, over the internet or something, or over Zoom. So yeah, we're trying to make sure that we can do that every year. it definitely allowed us, I think, to shape our season even better. I mean, we have so many more ideas now for season 5, just kind of bringing our own frame story, kind of back, more concise and more, it got really spread out this season. We included so many elements. So we're going to kind of bring it back home and get it smaller now. But also just in terms of just being able to just discuss each story in person and see how, each other responded, how we would be able to see the facial cues of each other. It definitely led to a much better meeting, I'd say. Yeah,
there's no substitute. I mean, again, having been a reporter, like I always leapt at the chance to go, like, no matter who it was, just a feature story about, the local student who won an award or what have you, or like a politician, you're like hardballing on an investigative story. Like you have to be in person, like otherwise, you lose 50% of the conversation. So
yeah, there's subtle clues. I mean, even between you and I now, like, we're having a fine conversation, but imagine if we were in the same room together. I could see how you're responding, how you're smiling, how you're not. That would ultimately influence the direction in which I would be talking with you. So yeah, there's a lot of missed nuances, I suppose.
Yeah, totally agreed. And that's even like even just about this story. Like, I mean, the way the audio was captured, even like I hate to keep harping on it, but the performances, like, you could hear like the breath of the cigarette. Like it was even like a different tenor of Mary Agnes, let's call her, Erin's performance. Like there would be like an exasperated cigarette exhale. And there would be one that was like a little more forceful. It was like, oh, wow. Like all these nuances were really captured as you can't do almost not being in the same room. So incredible. Well,
and then that opens up, more dialogue that these actors are not even in the same room together. So that just shows you how much talent is involved. I mean, like I've met Erin Lillis in person. I've had dinner with her. I don't remember if she actually smokes. I don't think she does, but I don't know. But for sure, for that scene, she's the kind of actor I could see at least using a prop maybe, because it does help just make the mouth work a certain way, instead of trying to pretend that you're smoking the cigarette, put a lollipop or something in your mouth, but it still adds to that effect. And then just I'm always blown away that when these audio dramas are being made, that it's great when they can all be in the same room, because they're for sure, like I listened to Mission to Zix, and that's a great comedy sci-fi one where they're always in the room together performing off of each other. But they ad-lib, so they kind of have to. But in general, like No Sleep Podcasts and Us and many other, horror audio dramas, like they're just sending their lines in. They're not reading to anybody, and yet they still can do their inflections so well when they're asking the question and then telling the answer as though that someone else was there really asking the question to their answer or giving them an answer to their question. It blows my mind constantly how these actors can do what they do.
I second that entirely.
So hey, as a horror author, tell me about your own process. Like, what do you feel about horror? And like, how would you define, if you were in a room full of other horror authors, like how would you show them who you are as a horror writer?
That's a great question, man. I don't know if I have a good answer. It's I've always been a horror fan, and I was even just kind of like thinking back to like, when I started writing horror, maybe, because from the word go, I was reading spooky books as a very young child, but I wasn't really writing too much horror. I always had aspirations to be a writer, but that was more like, literary fiction, if that's, what it's called nowadays. Hemingway style stories and what have you. But at some point, like I realized like horror is like, it's my first love, at least as far as movies and reading go. And at some point you realize like speculative fiction and horror can say things and can do things that you really can't even do with, some high-minded literary fiction or art piece can do.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's, well, I mean, the Bible's a great example. I mean, whether or not whether or not it's capital F fiction or not, a lot of it is pretty flippin' horrific, and a lot of it is very much speculative fiction, right? Talking snakes, what have you. Whether it's fiction or not, they were trying to tell eternal truths. So, so it figures that, in my mind, horror became a better avenue somewhere around like 10, 15 years ago for me. And so I really like kind of committed to it. I will say though that I don't like commit just to that genre at the same time, because the book I published and the book that's coming later this year, like, it has many horrific elements, whether it's pandemic conspiracies or like, crazy ass gun violence involving telekinesis in Mongolia. I'm not exaggerating. But it involves like horrific elements, but that's just part of the toolkit, I think. Or at least what I consider to be my toolkit. In this case, like, a short story is like a perfect venue for having, just the slice of horrific. In this case, in a death row jailhouse interview.
Yeah, I say it all the time that horror has so many shades of
Yes.
concepts underneath it. Horror is not just a monster chasing you. Horror is not just a dude with a knife also chasing you. Like, your story involved absolutely normal human beings. There was no supernatural element. There was nothing going on other than two human beings talking. And, so it would be hard pressed to just be like, this is horror. This is an example of horror. No, it was a thriller. It was suspense. It was, I don't know per se if we'd say it was religious, but definitely it's under the umbrella of horror, but it could also be that horror is under the umbrella of suspense or under the umbrella of thriller. So your story was absolutely golden in the fact that it made me scared, but not in a way that I was worried that some cultist was going to come busting through my door to set me on fire and sacrifice me to Molech. But yet I still I felt the ratcheting horror, that, and it wasn't that I felt, because sometimes, we need to feel for the victim, like our horror is derived through the horror that the victim is experiencing. And I wouldn't say that Michael himself was experiencing horror, but yet I was still experiencing horror based on just the evilness that Mary Agnes was delivering to us. And so that's another concept there too, of just the many different facets that horror can be written as, that you created this evil character of Mary Agnes, and that was the monster. That was the thing that was scaring me, not the scare I was feeling by proxy through our narrator who was experiencing it, because he was just a reporter just trying to talk to a death row inmate. It was very simple for him, and then he fucking died in the end. But that was not the horror. The horror was just the concepts that Mary Agnes was spewing into the interview. So, as a writer, do you tend to do that, or it sounds like you're saying that you kind of like to dip into lots of different categories of horror when you're writing?
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, it's like Mary Agnes in this case. And I did remember, like, that like flurry of short stories I was just like pounding out. And of course I'd like go over them obsessively. It wasn't just like a first draft or something. I'm a very like meticulous, if not like neurotic writer. Like every syllable almost is slaved over, right? I will say at the genesis of this, at the beginning of this story, and even considering in what direction it would all go down in, and starting with Moloch, it was a very like, I'm very much, I think it's been mentioned on the podcast before, there's like plotters and pantsers. I'm very much a pantser. I'm very much like, in the passion, the heat of the moment. And of course you got to corral it at some point where it's not going off the rails and makes no sense. But starting with Moloch, I knew I was driving toward, frankly, child murder, which to me is like the most horrific and, most unsettling of almost everything that can be done in a human sense. Because like when I was a reporter, whether or not it was newspapers the first part of my career, or later on, I was the editor of a forensic magazine. So it was a lot of forensic science. And I mean, just the parade of, horrific things I'd be writing about and talking about and occasionally seeing. It became clear that there's really nothing more extreme and terrifying and horrific and all that than the taking of like a young life. So it kind of like, again, tried to like embody all that in this character. So ably brought to life by Erin, which is why I think I keep harping on that performance, because it was like, she's like the pivot, right? That's like the whole fulcrum for everything horrifying and unsettling going on in that story. And it was just, somebody needed to knock it out of the park, and she happened to do it. So. Well,
and also, spoilers, there was no child murder in your story, according to, if we believe Mary Agnes, they all were living, right? So there was actually no child murder. So, hey, congratulations. You got us all scared of child murder, and you didn't have to murder any children. Good job. Another reason why you're such a great author.
Well, I mean, like, when it comes to horror, too, like, capital H, right? Like, unsettling and unexpected. Those are the ways you really, like, knock people off their balance. And that's when they don't know if up is down or left is right. So yeah, something like that, a little bit of a switcheroo that is all of this bullshit. Is it really just a tale a condemned woman is weaving, or is there some truth to this and it is like, conspiracy oldest time, it predates history, and there's a God before God was God, that's so yeah, hopefully that all serves the end purpose to scare the shit out of somebody.
Yeah. Your story is destined to, I think, become one of our classics. Just because of the setting and because of the ambiguity that is there but is not. It just bodes very well, I think, for holding up. We've got a couple of action-packed bangers that like sound a little similar to other action-packed bangers, but yours very much stands alone as not being similar to anything else that we've done. So you gave us a gem, and we just polished it a little bit, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, hey, as we draw to a close here, tell me where everybody can find your books, your novels, your short stories, everything that you've accomplished. Where can we seek you out at? Yeah,
sure. I'm on all the major social media channels, if that's what the kids call them nowadays. But I mean, I'm most addicted to Twitter, that horrible slaughterhouse of hot takes. So yeah, I'm at Seth Augenstein, just my full name there. And I have a website too, and it's SethAugenstein.com. How's that for a vanity URL? So
very simple. To the point. Look me up on me.com.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Right. Me the dude. Yeah. So
well, it was great of you for joining us tonight, Seth. I appreciate you taking the time to sit and chat, and I thank you for sharing your world with us here in the Grey Rooms.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hope to speak with you soon.
Yeah, well, we're gonna see you for season 5, so you bet your ass I'll be speaking with you again. Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, excellent. And as usual, the biggest thank you goes out to our fans and followers who listen daily and spread that good word of Bob. May you languish, may you lament, and may you loathe, but always with love. # stay gray. Take care and enjoy your evening, Seth.
Thanks. You too, Brooks.
Thank you. And good night, folks. Bye.
Join us each week after every episode for another edition of